Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie and I am here to chat with you, do makeup with you. This is not a makeup tutorial, so if you're here for a makeup tutorial, this is not the channel for you. However, if you just want to hang out with me and have fun, I'm sure we're going to have a good time. I was not sure I was going to be able to do a video today because there is a lot happening in my house. And there were dogs barking for quite some time and all kinds of things going on, so I wasn't sure I was going to make this happen today, but I have a little bit of time, so here I am to have some fun with you. So I've been doing videos that are focusing on spooky season and all the fun that comes with it, and today I thought it would be fun to talk about the legend of the Michigan Dogman. Have you heard of this? My introduction to this cryptid happened long ago when my family and I, as I was all of 10 years old, we moved up here to Northwest Michigan from a suburb of Detroit. Now I should tell you, when I first got here, moving from a suburb of Detroit to a tiny town in northern Michigan, which is pretty much all northern Michigan has, this tiny town, or Northwest Michigan, that's all we have is tiny towns. I was immediately like, where did we move to? Because I moved from an area that had stores right down the road. There were, you know, lots of different cultures represented in the community. And we moved to an area that is almost entirely white. And so it was like a total, just such a, you know, a strange experience for me to move from a place that was more urbanized. You know, there was just, you know, everything was available and there were all different types of people and so forth, to a place where, I mean, you have to understand, when we moved here in 1986, there was almost, you know, there was only a fraction of what's here now. There was a grocery store. It was a very small grocery store. A couple of gas stations, and that's about it. And, you know, one of those gas stations has since closed. Another one opened, but that's beside the story. So it was like a weird experience anyway to move up here from a suburb of Detroit and try to make sense of what I was, of this new world that I was living in. It was so strange to me. But one thing I did like was that there was so much, I guess, wilderness up here. I enjoyed that a lot because part of the convenience of having stores and so forth that were available, and some of them open 24/7, was everything was so developed. I mean, there was nowhere to go where it was just like you and the trees and so forth. At least no place that I could get to at the tender age of 10 years old. So we moved up here, and I remember our first night here, we stayed in this cabin by the lake because the house wasn't quite ready yet. And I just felt like, you know, as bewildering as it was up here, I felt like also we had just moved to like heaven on earth. So we hadn't been here for very long when we were introduced to the legend of the Dogman. Now, I still remember it clearly. My dad came home from work and he told us that he had been told about the Dogman. And we're like, what the heck is that? Never heard of this. And he explained to us that the Dogman is this cryptid that supposedly appears every 10 years on years that end in 7. And this by this time was 1987. And that year is significant, but we'll get to that later. And that he had been told by locals who had lived here for quite some time that they had actually encountered this cryptid. And this cryptid is a 7-foot tall creature that is said to possess the, you know, it has features of both a man and a canine. So it's a bipedal creature, but it can walk on all fours. Now, the story he got from the people who shared this with him is that they had seen the wife had been in the basement, I guess, doing laundry, and she had seen eyes looking at her through one of the casement windows, but they looked like the eyes of a human, which startled her, obviously. If it's nighttime and you're in your basement doing laundry and you see eyes looking through one of those little tiny windows at you, you're gonna be a little creeped out. And when her husband went to investigate, all he saw were the footprints of what appeared to be a very large dog. So he's telling us this, and I'm like, I didn't know what to think. I've always had kind of a love for these legendary characters and these local myths and legends and so forth. So I wasn't like entirely ruling it out, but it did seem a little implausible to me. And I pointed out, well, it's 1987 right now, and has anybody seen him? And to my knowledge, I was 11 years old at this time, and to my 11-year-old mind, if they hadn't, that meant it probably wasn't true. But also, had to be careful because it was, after all, 1987, and the Dogman was supposed to be making his appearance. Okay, so, as far as I know, at least locally, nobody saw the Dogman. Now, when you hear this tale, it sounds absolutely implausible, and I get that. However, it is interesting to note that the legends relating to the Dogman or similar creatures in Michigan go back to pre-colonial times, before the colonizers arrived. However, even the colonizers have their own tales to tell. And I'm going to read one of those to you later in this video. But one of them comes from the French inhabitants of Fort Michilimackinac, which we discussed on my last video. And they had a creature they referred to as the Loup Garou, which is basically like a werewolf. And these are accounts that go back to the 1700s. Now, there are also accounts from logging communities. Michigan at one time was the biggest provider, the biggest provider in the nation for white pine. So there were logging camps all over the place, harvesting this white pine and so forth. And there were lots of reports of a creature in the forest who looked like a very large canine of some kind, but also had some characteristics of a human. And it was very agile and very strong. And encounters with this creature were so terrifying that some people even, they were literally scared to death of this creature. And the first report of the Dogman actually happened in the 1870s. I think it was 1877. I'll have to check my notes in a second here. But it came from two loggers who encountered a creature in the forest that looked like a very large dog standing up on its hind legs, and it had blue eyes. Very, very weird. Now, even though the legend has been around for somewhere in the neighborhood of 130 years, it did not reach any major popularity until 1987, when a DJ from WTCM in Traverse City, Michigan, recorded a song called The Legend, it's The Legend of the Dogman. And he actually recorded this song as a joke, and he had based it on various myths and legends he'd heard from all over North America. And he decided to make a song for April Fool's Day, and have it, and broadcast it on April Fool's Day. And he just thought this will be a one-time thing. It would be hilarious to see how people react and so forth. He did not know that he was actually making a song about something that has been part of Michigan folklore for a long, long time. And the station started getting calls from people saying, oh yeah, we've encountered this, we've seen this. Your song terrified me because it was so you know, the encounter was so chilling, I just never wanted to think about it again. And then I heard your song and I knew I had to tell you. And over the years, there have been, you know, ever since the song, there have been literally hundreds of reports that this guy has received from people saying, hey, heard your song, let me tell you about my experience. So with his song, he tapped into something that he did not intend to do, but nevertheless, it gave people an avenue for sharing these experiences. Because could you imagine having experienced something of that nature? And who are you going to tell? Who are you going to tell who's going to listen to you and not, you know, especially in 1987, not like think of you as maybe a little out there, maybe a little off, and, you know, just really not validate you at all. So 1987 comes along. People start really talking about the Dogman legend and sharing their experiences. My family heard about it when we moved up here to northern Michigan and learned we'd moved right into Dogman territory. And over the years, this legend has kind of taken on a life of its own. Even if nobody heard of it before, it's not really going to go away now, because this song helped people find a way to talk about it. And I just realized, so if the Dogman appears every 10 years on years ending in 7, the first documented report would have been in 1877. I just solved my own mystery. So another report came in 1937 when a man said that he had been attacked by a pack of wild dogs, and in that pack there was one that stood up on its hind legs. And of course, he was terrified. Now, there are people who, you know, some of the articles that I read as I prepared for this suggested that there are no documented incidents of an encounter with this creature prior to 1987, implying that it's all fake, it's all a hoax, and people are just getting in on, you know, the popularity of it. However, that's not true. There was a journal written by a French fur trader in which he mentioned his own encounter with the Loup Garou, which, as I mentioned, is similar in description to this Dogman character. So, whether or not the song helped people find a way to tell their story, there is a strong indication that these stories have actually been around for some time. In Manistee, it is said that the Dogman lurks on the banks of the Manistee River, and that stories about his existence have been there since the indigenous tribes were there, before colonizers pushed them out. You know, so these are not new things. These are maybe things that, you know, mainstream people didn't really know about until 1987. That doesn't mean they aren't real. Now, I read an article yesterday. It was an interview with Rachel Clark from the Michigan History Center. It was on National Public Radio, and I'll be providing lots of links in the description if you want to look into this whole thing yourself. She was interviewed about the Dogman, and she talked about many of the same things I just shared with you about how these stories go back centuries. This is not new. She also pointed something else out. You know, she said she would neither confirm nor deny the existence of this creature because Michigan forests are so big and the wildlife in them is so diverse that it would really be almost impossible to say with certainty that a creature like this does not exist. And she pointed something else out. So I remember when this started. A few years ago, people started reporting sightings of large cats in the forests. And of course, a lot of people were dismissing it as being impossible. We don't have animals like that here, and so on and so forth. Well, recently, there have been cougar sightings in northern Michigan. Several of them, and they come about on a very regular basis. So even though initially people wanted to dismiss the idea that there were large cats living in the forests of northern Michigan, specifically northwestern Michigan, it turns out it was true. So just because it's not something that everyone is seeing doesn't mean it's not there. Now then, that brings up the question of, for me anyway, what makes something true? I'm not talking about what makes it real. I'm talking about what makes it true. Now, clearly, the people who were calling into WTCM at the time and were reporting these experiences that they had, clearly they experienced something. Did they have an encounter with the Dogman? I don't know. But clearly they experienced something. So, what makes it true? Is the experience itself enough to say that this is true, in that something happened to them, they encountered something, and that in itself is enough to make what they're saying true? Or is there a higher standard? Because the reality is, we believe a lot of things that we might not have personally experienced. And there might not even be hard scientific evidence for some of these things that we believe, but we still believe them. So my question to you, as we talk about myths and legends, as we have done throughout the month on this channel, is what, in your opinion, makes something true? And is the inability to verify the existence of a thing with quantifiable evidence enough to say that thing doesn't exist? And it's kind of like, you know, if you're going to dismiss the existence of, say, the Dogman in northern Michigan, or Wisconsin has its own version of it, which is the Beast of Bray Road, I believe it's called. It's very similar in its makeup to the Dogman. If you're going to say something like that doesn't exist because you've never seen it and there's no proof that it exists, my question to you is this: do you believe in God? Now you might think, Stephanie, that is such a reach. How can you even? Well, let me tell you. I will tell you how I can even. A lot of people who are asked to prove that there is a God will point to things like nature. They will point to things like a person's personal experiences. They will say, well, we know that there is a God because I experienced this phenomenon, or they'll point to how orderly nature is, and they'll say that proves that there's a God. Does it? Because you're not telling me that you have any proof of God's existence. You're giving me, at best, circumstantial evidence, which is what a lot of the evidence about these myths and legends, that's what we have, is circumstantial evidence. So if we're going to use such, you know, if that's going to be our standard for saying, for example, an omnipotent, omniscient being exists who created all of this, who created everything that we see, if that's going to be the standard that we use for verifying the existence of God, then why does that standard get suspended when it comes to verifying the existence of, say, the Dogman? It's just something to think about, because if we're going to apply these double standards, we have to ask, why do we do that? Is it because believing in something like the Dogman feels threatening? You know, I do think people are often threatened by what they can't explain, because that means acknowledging that they have less control than they want to believe that they do. So I think acknowledging the existence of these improbable creatures, of these creatures that scare us and, you know, let us know that we don't exist on this planet alone and we have to coexist with things that might not be altogether pleasant, I think that's a little bit scary for some people. So rather than acknowledging it as a possibility, it's easier to just say, oh, that's impossible, those things don't exist. But is it true? Just because something is preferable doesn't mean it's true. So, how do you define the truth? Not necessarily what's real, but what is true. And there is a difference. And I'm curious. Let me just check my notes because I felt like I had a lot more to tell you today. And today's just been so weird. And I'm really off track. So let me just check this real quick so I can make sure that I give you all the good things that I had planned for you. Oh, I do apologize. So the first sighting was not in 1877. It was in 1887. The Dogman is also said to have a fearsome howl similar to a human scream. Could you imagine being out in the woods and seeing something that, first of all, the appearance itself you can't really explain because it looks like both a wolf and a human all at the same time. And then if this thing lets out a howl and it sounds like a human scream, what in the world are you going to make of that? And who are you going to tell that's going to take it seriously? I think that's everything. Oh yeah. So in 2011, there was a feature film made about the Dogman, and it is, as you might expect, called The Dogman. It was shown at the State Theater in Traverse City, and I have not checked to see if this is available, but before I release this beautiful gem of a video onto the public, I will check, and I'll link it if it is. Now, there was there was a chunk of footage used in the video known as the Gable Film. And in this film, it is purported that there is footage of the Dogman. This film, I did watch the Gable Film, and it is basically old grainy video of families doing everyday stuff. It's the kind of thing you would expect a kid to record when they just got their first, like, recording device. They're just going to go around and record what's readily available, which is just a family doing everyday stuff. And then there is a very, very brief part of the film where the kid is filming the woods as they drive by, and for just a brief moment, you see this creature that is off in the distance, and then when they stop to film it, it takes notice of them and begins to charge. Now, when I looked at it, I'll be honest, to me, it looked like a bear. And black bears in northern Michigan are pretty common. We have one even right here in town that likes to hang out by the grocery store, and I personally love bears. They don't bother me in the least. I grew up, I didn't grow up there, but when I was little, we lived in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and my mother tells me that when I was much, really, really little, that it was not unusual at all for me to just go wandering off into the woods by myself because they didn't scare me at all. There was nothing about the woods that frightened me. So I would go wandering off into the woods by myself. I remember coming home from church, and I remember seeing Mama Bear and her cubs in our yard. And I remember peeking out my bedroom window at night and seeing bears in the yard, and you could just see when the porch lights hit them, you could see what they looked like, bathed in that light. So nothing about bears has ever scared me. So when I saw the video, there was nothing about it that was alarming to me, but I also wasn't there. Now, since that video has gone viral, the owner of the video, Micah Grusa, has said that the video was actually a hoax. It didn't really happen that way at all. So, but that does not debunk the existence of the Dogman. It simply debunks that one video. So what do you think? Getting back to the question of what makes a thing true. Do you have to have hard evidence of something before you'll believe it? Or do you think that there are things out there that we can't readily explain, and it's entirely possible that something like the Dogman exists, and it's clever enough to stay away from humans to the degree that it's hard to get any solid evidence of its existence? What do you think? I'm very curious to know. Now, a lot of people have, I mean, I shouldn't say a lot of people. The reason why I thought it would be fun to do this topic is because I read a comment online, and I don't even remember what the story was about that they were commenting on, but there was something about they were laughing about the Dogman, and they were like, well, wait till people find out that's actually just from a 1987 song, and it was never, you know, nobody ever actually believed it was true. And then I remember thinking, I doubt that. I doubt nobody ever thought it was true, and I doubt that the only reference to the Dogman in Michigan lore is because of a song from 1987. And sure enough, I was right about that. So I thought it would be fun to share that with you and also get your perspectives on how you define what's true and what kind of evidence would you need to convince you something like the Dogman is real. And do you think it's possible that you ever would find that evidence? Because with as long as this creature, this cryptid, has been part of Michigan lore, which was way before 1987, to my knowledge, there has never been any hard evidence presented that conclusively confirms the existence of this creature. It's all just been accounts that people have given of their experiences, or it's been the stuff of legends that people have passed down. So what do you think? As always, I'm going to pause. I'm going to finish what I'm doing, and then when I come back, I'm going to read you a little story about the Loup Garou that I mentioned a bit ago. So hang on, I will be right back. Hello, I am back. Do you ever buy cheap wigs just to play with them, and then you put them on and you're like, wow, I can see why this was only like $4. Well, this one was $6. It's so funny to me. Oh my gosh, I look like Ronald McDonald's bastard child. I don't know. It's funny. I kind of dig it just because it's so bad and so funny. So I think I might wear it for the duration. We'll see if I can handle it. Anyway, so I promised you a story, and I lost my place. Here it is. So this comes from that book I showed you last time, Werewolves and Will-o'-the-Wisps, French Tales of Mackinac Retold. The story that I'm going to read to you. Now, first I want to say my apologies to French-speaking people everywhere. There are a lot of French names in this story, and I'm probably going to mispronounce quite a few of them. If I encounter a French word that I absolutely can't pronounce, I will use, sometimes I use the English word in here as an alternative, and I'll be using that one, not because I don't love your language and I don't want to learn how to speak it, but just because I respect it enough that I also don't want to butcher it. So here we go. This story is called Angelique and the Wolfman. Now keep in mind, we're talking about Michigan Dogman. There are people who are saying, you know, these stories are new from since 1987 because that's when the song became popular, and so people are just responding to that. These stories in this book were written in the late 1700s. So I will read the book and you can draw your own conclusions. All right. On a small farm near Detroit lived a beautiful young girl, Angelique, and her father, Honoré. Their mother, poor soul, had died when the child was born, and the grief-stricken father had left Montreal to take up a new life in the wilderness. Honoré loved his daughter deeply. For her, he chose the softest bear skin for her bed, fawn skin for her Indian-style dresses. He even had French clothes brought from Montreal for church-going and celebrations. When she grew up, he taught her many things. To skin the beaver and muskrat and deer which he brought home, she learned how to stretch them on the drying frame. In the fort and among the habitants, all agreed that Angelique excelled all in her cooking of the whitefish and the pike, and her preparation of the suckling pig to just the right shade of golden, crackling brown. She was a happy girl, constantly singing bright French songs while spinning. constantly singing bright French songs while spinning. In the long winter evenings, her fingers were never idle, plaiting straw into hats which she sold, knitting socks, drying corn. All of these items brought her enough to buy pretty ribbons for her hair or a length of calico for a new dress. Her beauty was such that at corn huskings and dances, she was the queen, fascinating the local boys with her dark eyes and shining black hair. Nothing could compare when it comes to dancing the French dances that I can't pronounce. It was young Philippe who finally won her heart. Honoré gave his consent in the evenings. In the evenings, Philippe would take his fiancée for quiet canoe rides in the moonlight. And I'm sorry I butchered that sentence. I was a little distracted. What? What's up? Just a moment, please. My apologies. Sorry about that. Mothering and whatnot. Anyway, so let's start this paragraph over again. It was young Philippe who finally won her heart. Honoré gave his consent, and in the evenings, Philippe would take his fiancée for quiet canoe rides in the moonlight. Happily, they would talk of the wedding to come and of the new home that her husband was building for them. All the world seemed full of wildflowers and sunshine that spring as the wedding day grew near. Then, one afternoon, as Angelique was gathering wildflowers for the table, a strange figure flitted past her among the trees. Then in a clearing, Angelique stopped dead still, her hands clasped to her saint's medal, her heart pounding. Standing there in her path was a Loup Garou. He had robbed some habitant of coat and hat and had tucked his wolf's tail away. In his hand he held a cane like some Parisian dandy. When Angelique could not move, he gave her a lovesick leer, showing his sharp wolf's teeth and lolling tongue beneath a bristly muzzle. Then he started toward her, arms outstretched. Dropping her flowers, the girl fled and reached her cabin just in time to slam and bolt the door. When word reached the neighbors, they set out to find and kill the beast. All attempts were fruitless, however. He seemed to lead a charmed existence. One hunter nearly succeeded. From a silver coin he molded a bullet. Waiting beside the path, he spotted the wolfman and fired. But instead of killing the monster, it only cut off his tail. The tail was dried and stuffed and thought by the Indians to be a powerful fetish. Very interesting. The wedding day came at last, and all nature seemed to be waiting for the fair Angelique and the handsome Philippe. At last the two entered the fort church, followed by all the habitants in their best clothing. In front of the altar, decorated with flowers, they knelt and were wed. While the bell rang sharply from its wooden belfry, the two went to the sacristy and wrote their names in the registry, then hurried off to their new home. There they waited on the grass to greet their friends. Refreshments were served, the fiddles sounded, and in true French-Canadian fashion, they prepared to celebrate for several days. Suddenly, while the merrymaking was at its height, the terrible Loup Garou dashed into the crowd, seizing the beautiful Angelique, and carried her into the forest. The crowd was stunned, but Philippe started off in an instant pursuit, hearing the screams of his lovely bride. The others followed while women and children and the curé said prayers. Late that night, the men returned without Philippe. My nephew is here. Late that night, the men returned without Philippe. They had been unable to find a wolfman, and the bridegroom too seems to have disappeared. The next morning they went out at dawn and found him wandering around and around in the swamp, clutching a bit of Angelique's wedding dress in his trembling hand. When they tried to question him, he only stared at them with his eyes rimmed with madness. They led him home, but daily he returned to the swamp to stare into the slimy waters. A year passed while Philippe grew gaunt with sorrow. At the marriage of his sister, however, he seemed to have improved after the ceremony. Suddenly rushed into the woods. Let me start over again. I've got some distractions here. At the marriage of his sister, however, he seemed to improve after the ceremony and suddenly rushed into the woods. He did not return until sunset, his clothing torn, his eyes wild as if he had been chasing the Loup Garou. It was then they heard the story. He had indeed tracked the fiend to the water's edge, and here the animal, seeing no escape from the stone on which he stood, stretched out his arms as if beckoning to the evil one. At that moment, a giant catfish rose to the surface, opened his mouth, and the Loup-Garou vanished. The footprint of the demon may still be seen on the rock, and to this day, no habitant will eat catfish. Very interesting. So not only did we get some ancient tales of the, perhaps, Michigan Dogman, but also the origins of catfish. What? Okay. Anyway, or at least a story about catfish, not the origins. Anyway, as I said, I'm a little bit distracted. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any interesting tales to tell about the Michigan Dogman, I would love to hear them. You can leave them in the comments below. If you enjoy these broadcasts, these shows, these episodes, whatever you want to call them, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends. Let the whole wide world know that I'm here wearing this wig, telling you stories at least a couple times a week. Maybe not with this wig, but I'm still here. Also, I have a Patreon, and I will leave the link for that below. You can support me there if you like. That will allow me to provide more and better content for you. And if you are enjoying what I already give you, it would be great if you would consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. I don't really love this look as much as I thought I might. I kind of hoped once I got this wig on it would have some redeeming factors, but alas, it does not. It's just there. Anyway, you have a great rest of your day, and be careful, make good decisions out there, be safe, get out and vote. If you haven't already voted, make sure you vote. Your vote matters more this time around than maybe it ever did before. Also, have a wonderful Halloween, however you're celebrating. Some of you are probably not going trick-or-treating because of the current situation in the world. And however you choose to celebrate, I hope you have fun. I am going out as a plague doctor, which is awesome. A little bit nondescript because I will literally be covered in head to toe from black with flowing robes and whatnot and so forth, but still a lot of fun. Anyway, I will talk to you again real soon. You take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and do not should on yourselves or should on anyone else. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.